You wrote you've lost $55 million gambling over the years.
Stupidity, but it is. I love the action. I love the adrenaline going in there.
I am James, and this is Golf Relived. They said he drinks too much, they said he eats too much, they said he bets too much, and the tragic truth about John Daly is that every single one of those things is true. But a former caddy who stood beside him for 18 holes at a time will tell you something that the headlines never could. The real story is bigger than the rumors. It always was. Picture it from the caddy's point of view. You are standing on a tee box next to a man the world is about to discover. You watch him pull out a driver. You watch him wind that club so far back it nearly touches the ground behind him, and then the whole world shakes for just 1 second. That is what it felt like to be close to John Daly. A front row seat to something you could never fully explain to someone who was not there. The caddies who worked alongside him describe it the same way every time. They say it was like watching a slow motion crash that was somehow also the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. Impossible to look away, impossible to fully understand. Before we go any further, if this story is moving you, go ahead and give this video some hype. Tap that hype button right now. It helps more people find stories like this one, and John Daly's story deserves to be heard by as many people as possible. Now let us go back to where it all began. August of 1991, Crooked Stick Golf Club in Indiana. John Daly was not supposed to be there. He was the 9th alternate for the PGA Championship. That means 8 players had to withdraw before he could even get in the door. When Nick Price pulled out late, Daly got the call. But the call came so late that he had no time to fly. He drove nearly 500 miles through the night just to make his Thursday morning tee time. He arrived exhausted, unknown, and without a single practice round on the course. Most players spend days walking a course before a major. They study every slope, every bunker, every tree line. They talk through shot shapes and wind directions and which pins are dangerous. They build a full mental map before they ever hit a competitive shot. John Daly had none of that. He had never set foot on Crooked Stick before he stood on the first tee to compete. What he had instead was a caddy named Jeff Medlin who went by Squeaky. Squeaky had originally been hired to caddy for Nick Price. He had spent the practice days walking every hole, building a detailed yardage book. When Price withdrew and Daly came in, Squeaky stayed. He transferred all of that knowledge to a man who had never seen the course. The strategy Squeaky used was simple and brilliant. While every other caddy that week was pointing out bunkers and warning about water and measuring angles through the fairway, Squeaky did something different. He handed Daly the driver on nearly every tee box and said 3 words. "Kill it, John." That was the entire game plan. Daly's power was so extraordinary that he could fly the ball over the very hazards that were trapping everyone else. Pete Dye had designed that course to punish players who went for too much. John Daly made Pete Dye's masterpiece look like a pitch and putt. He shot 69, then 67, then 69 again, then 71. He won by 3 strokes. He collected a $230,000 winner's check. He had played 0 practice rounds. He had driven through the night. He had never been on the course before, and the entire golf world stopped and stared. David Faraday watched him that week and said it was like watching a new species. That is exactly what it felt like. Nobody had ever seen a human being move a golf ball the way John Daly moved it. To understand why, you have to understand his swing. Most golf coaches teach what is called a parallel backswing. The club goes back until it is roughly horizontal to the ground, and then it comes forward. That position gives you control and timing. John Daly ignored all of that. He swings the club so far back that it travels well past parallel, sometimes nearly reaching his lead foot as it wraps around his body. This creates a massive whipping motion. The longer the arc, the more energy builds up. By the time that club comes through the ball, it is moving at a speed most people will never come close to. He led the entire PGA Tour in driving distance for 11 consecutive years, but here is what people forget. Despite that raw, violent power off the tee, the man had the softest hands around the greens. Fred Couples once said that Daly was one of the only players whose natural talent was so obvious that a fellow professional would actually pay just to watch him practice. Power and touch in one body. That combination is rarer than most people realize. But being around that power came with a price. Ask any caddy who spent real time with John Daly and they will tell you that the golf was only half the story. The other half was watching a man run on fumes that nobody else would even attempt to breathe. At the height of his career, Daly was drinking between 26 and 28 cans of Diet Coke every single day. That is more than 500 gallons of soda per year. He was smoking roughly 40 cigarettes a day. He once joked that he could not imagine being allowed to smoke on a treadmill, so traditional cardio was basically off the table. One specific story from his caddies describes a single 18-hole round where Daly smoked 21 cigarettes, drank 12 Diet Cokes, and ate 6 bags of Peanut M and Miss Not as a joke. That was just Tuesday, and somehow at the end of that round, he was still hitting shots that most professionals could not produce on their best day. There is no science that fully explains it. The caddies who watched it up close called it metabolic defiance. He simply did not follow the rules that the human body is supposed to follow. Back in his college days at the University of Arkansas, things were even more extreme. He reportedly managed his weight during that time on a diet made up almost entirely of popcorn, cigarettes, and Jack Daniels. He eventually had lap band surgery in 2009, which helped him lose more than 100 pounds and brought his Diet Coke intake down to a more manageable 10 to 12 cans a day. He also battled bladder cancer. He survived a near-fatal spider bite. Through all of it, he kept showing up. He kept swinging. The caddies who know him will tell you that resilience is not a word people normally associate with John Daly, but it should be. Now here is where the tragic truth gets heavier, because the golf, the Diet Coke, the cigarettes, none of that is the part that truly breaks your heart. The part that breaks your heart is what happened to the money. Between 1991 and 2007, John Daly reviewed his tax records and arrived at an estimate of his total gambling losses. The number was somewhere between $55 million and $57 million. His career earnings on the golf course were approximately $10.1 million. That means he lost more than 5 times what he made playing golf. The endorsements, the appearance fees, the deals, all of it was consumed by the casinos. He played 7 hands of blackjack at the same time, with each hand carrying a bet of $5,000 to $15,000. He once sat at a slot machine for 2 consecutive days without leaving. In 2005, he took a $750,000 check to Las Vegas. Within 30 minutes, $600,000 of it was gone. By the time 5 hours had passed, his total loss for that single session was $1,650,000. He later explained that in the early days of his career, losing $100 felt catastrophic. But over time, his tolerance grew so extreme that only losses in the millions gave him any emotional reaction at all. He was chasing the same rush he felt on the first tee of a major. The casino was just a different kind of tee box. The cost was not only financial. His ex-wife Sherry Miller described a specific argument about gambling where Daly reportedly took $55,000 in cash, money he had just won, and threw it off a bridge to prove a point about how little it meant to him. That image stays with you. A man throwing a small fortune off a bridge, not out of generosity, but out of rage and numbness. The volatility in those years contributed to the end of 4 marriages, a streak he has referred to himself, with painful humor, as the marriage slam. Here is the part that people forget, and it might be the most important part of this entire story. During the first round of that 1991 PGA Championship at Crooked Stick, the very tournament that made him famous, a spectator named Tom Weaver was killed by a lightning strike on the course. John Daly, who was 25 years old and had just won his first major title, donated $30,000 from his winner's check to set up a college fund for Weaver's 2 daughters, Karen and Emily. He did not announce it loudly. He did not ask for credit. He just did it because he felt it was his responsibility. Since the fan had come out to support the players, he believed the players owed something to the fan's family in return. The Weaver family invested that money carefully. It grew. It eventually covered the full cost of both daughters' educations. Karen became a palliative physician. Emily became a respiratory therapist. Daly intentionally stayed away from the family for years because he did not want to stir up painful memories. Then, in 2005, at a charity event, he finally met them. They thanked him for changing the course of their lives. Beyond the Weaver family, he has donated to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, to Boys and Girls Clubs of America, to his high school and university sports programs. He once shaved his signature mullet to raise money for charity. The man who could throw $55,000 off a bridge in anger could also give $30,000 away in quiet, genuine compassion. Both of those things are true at the same time. Then came the moment that proved beyond any doubt he was more than just a long drive and a wild story. The 1995 Open Championship at St. Andrews. He arrived in Scotland during one of the lowest stretches of his personal life. He had lost major sponsorships because of his behavior off the course. He admitted publicly that he had almost no confidence when he arrived. The critics were circling. The golf world was watching to see if he would finally break under the weight of everything he was carrying. Many people expected him to fall apart on that stage. They expected the chaos of his personal life to follow him onto the fairways of the oldest golf course in the world. What happened instead became one of the most remarkable performances in major championship history. He did not win with his driver that week. He won with his putter. In 40-mile-per-hour winds on the massive rolling greens of St. Andrews, he discovered that the key to the tournament was 2 putting from anywhere. Some of those putts came from 60 to 100 feet away. He mastered the greens while others fell apart in the wind. In the final stretch, an Italian golfer named Costantino Rocca nearly stole the whole thing when he holed a 65-foot putt from the Valley of Sin on the 72nd hole to force a playoff. The crowd erupted. The pressure was enormous. John Daly went into that playoff and won it by 4 strokes. he lifted the claret jug at the home of golf. The man who had driven through the night to play his first major had now won the most historic championship in the world on the most strategic course it has ever been played on. Despite winning only 5 times on the PGA Tour, John Daly consistently draws bigger crowds than players who have won dozens of times. The reason is not complicated. He is an open book. While other athletes carefully manage their image and say the right things in interviews and present a polished, sponsor-friendly version of themselves to the world, Daly just tells the truth about the gambling, about the drinking, about the marriages, about the health struggles. He has said in interviews that he sees himself as no different from a fireman or someone working behind a counter at a fast food restaurant. His job just happens to be playing golf. That lack of pretension is not a PR strategy. It is just who he is. And people can feel the difference between a person who is being real and a person who is performing realness. John Daly has never been performing. He stays after rounds to sign autographs. He poses for photos. He talks to fans for hours, sometimes in the middle of tournaments. He wears the loudest, most outrageous pants you have ever seen and smokes on the course and says exactly what he thinks without checking to see if it is acceptable first. For millions of people who feel like the world of professional sports has drifted into a land of carefully managed images and corporate speak, John Daly feels like fresh air. He is a blue-collar hero in a white-collar sport. The Arkansas kid who never pretended to be anything other than exactly what he was. The later chapters of his story carry something that was not always present in the earlier ones: stability. His son, John Daly II, is a golfer at the University of Arkansas, carrying on the family connection to the Razorbacks. In 2021, the father and son entered the PNC Championship together and defeated Tiger Woods and his son Charlie to win the tournament. Think about that. After everything, after the losses and the marriages and the health battles and the years of chaos, John Daly stood on a golf course with his son and beat one of the greatest players who ever lived. It was the kind of moment that makes you believe redemption is real, that the people who struggle the hardest can still arrive somewhere worth standing. His son has also caddied for him at major exhibition events, walking the same fairways, carrying the same bag, keeping the tradition alive. That image of father and son on the same course, sharing the same passion, says more about who John Daly became than any headline ever could. Through it all, he has built a brand that reflects exactly who he is and who he has always been. His partnership with Loudmouth Golf brought his wild clothing style to the mainstream and gave thousands of fans a way to dress like the man they admired. He has designed golf courses, including award-winning ones. He released 2 music albums and even contributed vocals for other artists, leaning into the country roots that shaped him. He has licensing deals with the Dallas Cowboys and the Arkansas Razorbacks. He launched cannabis products and a drink named after himself. Even after losing a fortune, he rebuilt something real by simply being himself. No reinvention, no image consultant. Just John Daly offered to the world exactly as he is. The tragic truth about John Daly is not that he drank too much or bet too much or lived too loudly. The tragic truth is that a man with that much talent, that much power, and that much genuine heart also carried demons that cost him dearly in ways that cannot be recovered. $55 to $57 million gone, 4 marriages ended, years of health struggles that would have stopped most people permanently, and yet he kept going. Not with a comeback tour or a reinvention story packaged for television, he just kept being John Daly, kept swinging, kept signing autographs, kept showing up. The full picture is more complicated and more beautiful than the tabloid version ever captured. He gave money to a family he did not know. He told the truth when lies would have been easier and far more comfortable. He kept showing up even when his body and his bank account told him to stop. He raised a son who loves the game and carries the Daly name into a new generation. He made fans feel seen in a sport that often looks right past ordinary people. He is not just a cautionary tale. He never was. He is an icon of what happens when a fully human being steps into the spotlight without a mask, messy and generous and broken and gifted all at once. His story will outlast the gossip. It will outlast the tabloid headlines. If you see yourself in any part of this story, leave a comment below. Tell us whether you see John Daly as a hero, a warning, or something in between. Subscribe if you want more stories like this right here on Golf Relived. And if this moved you at all, hit like before you go. John Daly gave the game absolutely everything he had. The very least we can do is remember him well.